You know, usually when you decide to go for a swim, there's like a whole ritual to it. You don't just instantly appear in the water.
Right. Yeah. You dip a toe in first.
Exactly. You dip a toe in, maybe you sit on the edge for a minute, or you slowly walk down those little plastic stairs in the shallow end just to get your body used to the temperature. You ease into it.
Yeah, there's a necessary transition period there. I mean, the human nervous system needs that moment to adjust to the shock of the water before you fully submerge yourself.
Right. But, okay, imagine walking up to a pool and there is just no shallow end. There are no stairs. In fact, it's just a sheer drop into like 10 feet of freezing pitch black water.
Oh, wow. That sounds terrible.
Right. You just have to jump in and deal with the shock immediately. Honestly, it's exhausting just thinking about it.
It's entirely jarring. Most people wouldn't even attempt it, honestly. They just turn around, walk away from that pool entirely, and go look for something a little more comfortable, a little more inviting.
Yeah. And that feeling, that total lack of a shallow end, is exactly what independent artist A.J. Johnson realized about his own life's work. Welcome to the Deep Dive, by the way. Today, we are bringing you right into this incredibly raw, candid 2026 update video from an independent YouTube creator and musician named Andrew A.J. Johnson.
And the video is titled, Enduring Failure, Disappointment, and the Future of My YouTube Channel. Very light viewing, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. But, this deep dive isn't just about one musician's struggle to get views. It's actually a fascinating micro-study on creator burnout, the sheer psychological weight of the current internet, and honestly, a bracing look at what it means to be a human artist staring down an AI-dominated future.
Which is something we are all going to have to grapple with.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. A.J. Johnson has been making, traditional original music albums since 2009. But here, in 2026, he announces he has officially entered what he calls his post-album life.
He's moving on.
Totally. He says he is in his post-documentaries and post-AI experiments era. Instead, he's completely pivoting to singles, visualizers, lyric videos, and YouTube shorts to present what he actually calls his melancholic disco music.
Which, that is such a profound shift for someone who clearly identified as a traditional album artist for over a decade.
Oh, absolutely.
His video really acts as a masterclass in examining the tension between an artist's grand vision and the audience's actual reception. Here is an artist who has spent 10 years on a platform, evolving, trying all these massive new formats, just pouring his absolute heart into his work.
Right.
And yet the overwhelming sentiment he expresses in this update is just profound disappointment. He explicitly states that the turnout for his recent, really inventive project, like his documentary shorts, was just dismal.
Yeah.
Which kind of forces us to ask the mechanical question, right? Why isn't this connecting after 10 years of foundational work?
Which brings us right back to that swimming pool analogy I mentioned. Because AJ is incredibly self-aware about his own material. He admits that his art is just full of unfiltered, raw emotion.
Very heavy stuff.
Yeah, he's constantly dealing with heavy themes. Unrequited love, deep grief, serious inner conflict. And he realizes he doesn't build any on-ramps for the audience.
There's no shallow end.
Exactly, no shallow end. He expects them to just dive straight into the deep, freezing water, his grief, right alongside him. And that exhausts people.
What's fascinating here is how he identifies the specific resulting isolation of that artistic choice. He uses this really striking word. He calls it being invisibilized.
Invisibilized, wow.
Yeah, he feels sidelined, minimized and entirely removed from the shared environment of the platform. He actually says it feels like he has exhausted an entire city with his, quote, musical shenanigans.
Okay, that phrase, musical shenanigans, that really stuck out to me when we were reviewing this. It feels like such a strong defense mechanism.
Oh, totally.
He's putting his deepest, most painful traumas into this melancholic disco music, but then minimizing it as just shenanigans, because he assumes the audience just views it as annoying background noise.
It's incredibly self-deprecating, and it stems from his suspicion about why he's being ignored, right? He wonders aloud in the video if there's a network of people actively working against him, or if people just have cruel intentions.
Right, like an active conspiracy.
Exactly. But he ultimately acknowledges he'll never really know if it's deliberate cruelty or just a massive fundamental misunderstanding of his art. However, he does provide a really crucial piece of evidence that points to the latter.
Which is?
He notes that he doesn't have any strikes, he doesn't have any bans anywhere on the internet.
Oh, right. Which is a huge distinction. Because think about it, if he were actually toxic or violating community guidelines, the algorithmic systems running these platforms would have a tangible, mechanical reason to suppress him.
There'd be a record.
Yeah, there would be a digital paper trail of rule breaking.
Exactly. The total lack of strikes proves that his isolation isn't punitive. He isn't being shadow banned by some malicious algorithm. The isolation is purely behavioral on the part of the audience. The general public simply finds his raw, unfiltered emotion too heavy to digest while they're just casually scrolling.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, think about how the modern internet user behaves today. They're looking for a quick hit of dopamine, maybe a laugh, or just a simple distraction from their own day. When they encounter a sheer drop into freezing water with no on-ramps, they just swipe away.
Right, they look for a warmer pool.
And when millions of people passively swipe away, the algorithm learns that this content doesn't retain attention, so it simply stops serving it. That passive behavioral rejection, honestly, that's almost more painful than an active ban, because it's a rejection of his raw humanity, not just his compliance with some terms of service.
That is just a brutal reality to face. And honestly, it makes me wonder about the physical and mental toll it takes to produce that kind of work.
Yeah.
Because he isn't just diving into the deep end emotionally, right? He is also drowning in the physical production process of these videos.
He really is. The isolation he feels is just massively compounded by this grueling operational problem. He refers to himself as one-man band, taking on every single aspect of production himself.
Wow.
Writing, recording, editing, the visualizers, the promotion, all of it.
Wait, let me stop you there. Because I understand he's burned out from doing everything himself. But if he knows that making these endless, massive, complex videos is destroying him, why on earth did he resist making shorter, easier content for so long?
That's a great question.
I mean, the internet has been moving toward these quick 15-second clips for years now. Why did he keep pushing these monolithic projects? Isn't doing less content just easier?
You would think so, purely from a labor standpoint, but it really comes down to a deeply ingrained artistic ethos and, honestly, the mechanics of his specific training. AJ explicitly states that he feared being associated with soundbite culture,
Oh, okay.
or what he calls clipped communications. He actually has classical style training when it comes to recording. So when he records a vocal take or a guitar part, he doesn't just piece it together. He records it all the way through from the top of the song to the absolute bottom, take after take.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he does it to capture the full emotional arc of the actual performance.
Oh, I see. So he isn't just like punching in one line at a time until it sounds pitch perfect on a computer. He's trying to capture a continuous, living, breathing performance.
Precisely. And to take a deeply considered, continuous emotional performance and arbitrarily chop it into a random 15-second vertical clip feels, to him, like a violent betrayal of the work itself.
Yeah, I get that.
He wants to show the audience the entire tapestry, but the 2026 internet only has the attention span for a single thread. So by insisting on maintaining his artistic integrity, he falls into what he calls the jack-of-all-trades trap.
Meaning he's trying to compete with massive media companies while doing everything himself.
Yeah.
Which is just mathematically impossible to sustain.
Right, and he recognizes that being a jack-of-all-trades in an already impossible, hypersaturated environment is a strict recipe for disaster. Now, he did try to mitigate this mechanically over the years.
Oh, so...
Well, he spent an enormous amount of time developing automated processes to create more personalized content. He built a system where he could theoretically post something without having to think too much about it, relying on all this hard work he did years ago to carry the channel forward.
But wait, wouldn't that automation save him? I mean, if the machine is doing the heavy lifting, shouldn't he be a bit less exhausted?
It saves him labor, absolutely, but it costs him the connection. He actually calls this automation a bittersweet achievement because, yes, he automated his workflow to survive as a one-man band, but the end result is a channel that feels perfectly functional but entirely stagnant.
Interesting.
When you automate content delivery, you often strip away the immediate, messy, real-time reactions that audiences actually bond with. You basically automate the human flaws right out of it.
Which leads right into that incredible metaphor he uses. He looks at his channel with all this automated, carefully crafted content, and he realizes that if this were 10 years ago, his channel would look cutting edge. But here in 2026, he says it blends in like living room furniture.
Yeah, that one hits hard.
Wow. Living room furniture.
Yeah.
That actually physically hurts to hear.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, think about it for yourself. I can immediately think of 3 or 4 creators I used to watch religiously who I now just scroll right past without even realizing it. They literally became part of the background.
It's the ultimate paradox of content creation. You work tirelessly to build a consistent presence, right? To be incredibly reliable for your audience. But the reward for that intense reliability is often complete invisibility.
Yeah.
The audience becomes so accustomed to your output that it ceases to be an event. You just become the couch. They know you're there. They might even find comfort in knowing you exist, but they stop actively engaging with the fabric.
And if his 10-year catalog already feels like invisible living room furniture today, his outlook on the very near future is even more staggering. Because right now, he's just dealing with human apathy. But we really have to talk about the looming shadow of artificial intelligence. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It does, because AJ pivots from analyzing the past decade to forecasting the end of this current one. He's looking squarely ahead to the 2030s.
And his prediction is just chillingly matter-of-fact. He states that AI will increase exponentially, to the point where everything he has done over the past decade, all that grueling one-man band labor, all the raw emotional processing, will look completely outdated within just 2 to 3 years.
What is particularly insightful here is his reasoning regarding why it will make human content outdated. It's not just about the technology getting better, it's about consumer psychology.
Right.
AJ believes that as we enter the 2030s, the general public simply will not care if music is 100% AI generated. They won't care if a human breathed the air to sing the note or if a machine just synthesized the waveform.
He uses a really specific comparison to auto-tune to explain the mechanics of this shift, right?
Yes, and the auto-tune analogy is incredibly sharp for understanding mass market adoption. Think about the mechanics of auto-tune when it first emerged. It was basically an effect. It was an industry secret to fix flat notes, and then it became a highly visible, often mocked novelty.
Right, like T-Pain or Cher.
Exactly, and purists absolutely hated it. But what happened, over time, it just became the invisible, ubiquitous standard of modern pop and hip-hop. The public completely accepted it because it just sounded aesthetically pleasing. They gladly traded the, quote, purity of a flawed human vocal take for the convenience of a perfectly polished final product.
And AJ argues that AI generation is just the exact next evolution of autotune.
Exactly. Initially, it's a novelty, but eventually it's just an accepted, unremarkable reality. He believes that the only people who will actually care about the human element, the origin story of how the art was made, will be other artists, musicians, producers, and songwriters.
Okay, I really have to push back on this, though.
Yeah.
Because it sounds a bit fatalistic. If you look at massive artists today, the Taylor Swifts, the Adeles, the Kendrick Lamar's people are obsessed with the lore.
That's true.
They love the human origin story. Do we really believe the mass market is just going to abandon the human connection entirely and accept purely synthetic aesthetics? Or is this just the perspective of a profoundly burnt-out creator who is already feeling rejected by his human audience? Because, I mean, if your audience already treats you like furniture, it's pretty easy to assume they'd gladly swap you for a cheaper AI-generated couch.
That is a very fair critique, and his burnout is absolutely coloring his projection. However, while we do love the lore of massive pop stars, AJ is pointing out that the vast majority of media consumption is completely passive.
Okay, yeah.
Think about the millions of hours of lo-fi study beats, workout playlists, or just background ambient music people stream every single day. For those massive utilitarian use cases, convenience and aesthetic pleasure absolutely override concerns about origin.
That's a great point.
But to your point, AJ isn't entirely fatalistic about AI itself. He actually doesn't view it as an inherent malicious evil.
Right. He outlines a mechanical path forward for artists. He believes there is an ethical way to live harmoniously with AI, but it requires adopting what he calls a producer mindset.
Right.
You can't just type a prompt and let the machine do the driving. You have to approach it with conscious awareness, deep active listening skills, and genuine editorial creativity. You basically become the director of the machine rather than its competitor.
And that leads to a deeply poignant admission about his own underlying motivations over the last few years. He says that his main goal, really from 2018 all the way to 2024, was just to prove he was here.
Man.
He wanted to make it clear that he was someone who existed, making human art, presenting himself as humanly as possible before the technology went, as he puts it, hog wild.
That hit so hard. He just wanted to leave a human fingerprint in the cement before it completely dried. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this brings us to a massive psychological crossroads. If the audience currently treats his work like invisible furniture, and if a tsunami of AI content is going to wash over everything in 3 years anyway, How does an artist like AJ keep going?
Right, why not just quit?
Exactly. Why doesn't he just pack up his equipment and walk away?
Because he reaches a profound psychological resolution in this video. He experiences a major breakthrough regarding a trap we can call the Savior Project.
Okay, let's dig into the mechanics of the Savior Project, because I think this applies to almost everyone listening, not just YouTubers or musicians.
It absolutely applies to anyone with ambition. The Savior Project is that classic if-then psychological fallacy. AJ exposes a lifelong mistake he's made, operating under the illusion that if I make this incredible album, then people will respect me. Or my life will be magically better after this documentary is finished.
Yes, it's the idea that your next piece of work is going to be the skeleton key that unlocks all the validation, understanding, and financial security you've ever craved. We all do this.
We really do.
We think, once I get this promotion or once I publish this paper, everything changes.
Precisely. But AJ learned the harsh mechanical truth of the attention economy. He says plainly that people generally don't care about his experiences. They don't care about the years of labor he put into his visualizers or his videos. The documentary didn't save him.
Wow.
The album didn't fix his life. Realizing that the Savior Project is a complete myth is devastating at first, but it's also incredibly liberating. Because it means he no longer has to carry the crushing weight of expecting his art to rescue him. He no longer needs to create a big thing to feel dignified or respected. He can just exist.
So what does this all mean for his actual day-to-day life now? Mechanically, it means he is setting serious boundaries. He talks about learning to stay in his lane.
Yeah, which is so healthy.
He's actively protecting his psychological peace by avoiding YouTube wormholes and what he calls armchair investigations. He used to feel this intense pressure to speak up on every topic he thought was important, almost as if he owed the internet his every waking thought.
But he's realized the value of compartmentalization. He has knowledge and information about things that he simply doesn't need to share publicly. He's finding that distinct line between his public persona and his private self, and learning that sometimes the engagement just isn't worth the emotional cost.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to bleed for the internet every time he has a thought.
And yet, despite all of this, despite the stark reality of the gap between his magnificent creative visions and the dismal audience turnout, despite the AI tsunami, he doesn't stop making music. And that is because, for AJ, the music isn't just content to be monetized.
No, not at all. It operates mechanically as medicine. AJ explicitly talks about the healing properties of his music. He has a lot of unresolved grief and inner conflict. He talks about needing to get comfortable living in his space of uncertainty and suspension.
Right.
He finds himself spiraling, asking, am I to blame for this, that, and the other thing? Is my isolation my own fault? That is a crushing cognitive burden to carry. But composing a piece of melancholic disco helps him process that burden.
It's an outlet.
Exactly. The act of pairing sad, complex lyrics with a driving disco beat allows his body to move while his mind processes the trauma. He doesn't make music just to feed an algorithm. He does it because it is the mechanism he uses to survive his own mind.
He mentions that he wishes he could share those healing properties with the audience, noting that you almost have to experience it, live in a room with him to truly understand the frequency of it. But even if the audience doesn't get it, the process still heals him. Which is why, even amidst all this acceptance of his obscure reality, he still has one very human request for his audience.
Which is?
He asks them to go watch and like his documentary, The Making of Paramola Ties. Because even if he knows it won't save him, he still wants to close that gap between his vision and reality, even just a little bit.
It is a beautiful, deeply human contradiction. He fully accepts the mechanical reality that people don't care, but he still possesses the human hope that maybe, just maybe, they will. And that irrational hope is what keeps the creative engine running in the face of impossible odds.
It really is. What an incredible journey this source material has taken us on today. We've traced A.J. Johnson's evolution from a traditional album maker in 2009 to a post-album creator navigating the fragmented 2026 landscape. We've seen him battle the perception of his raw, unfiltered emotion, jumping into that freezing pool of grief without providing any algorithmic on-ramps.
We've examined the physical exhaustion of trying to be a one-man band, the realization that his highly automated empire ended up feeling like invisible living room furniture, and his bracing acceptance that the AI wave of the 2030s will likely wash over his entire decade of work.
Yet through all of that systemic failure and disappointment, he's still holding space for himself in what he calls his lost decade. He is still making melancholic disco to heal his own unresolved grief.
This raises an important question, though, and it takes us far beyond just AJ's channel or the music industry. We've talked a lot about the lack of on-ramps in AJ's art and how uncomfortable it makes people to be thrown into the deep end of someone else's grief.
Right.
But if we look at the future of AI-generated media, it's clear that the algorithms will become perfectly tailored to always give us a shallow end. The machines will learn exactly what makes us comfortable and never challenge us. So if all future art is perfectly smoothed out to avoid giving us any emotional shock, what happens to our collective empathy? If media never forces us to jump into the freezing, uncomfortable deep end of another human being's raw experience, will we eventually forget how to swim entirely?
That is a terrifying and essential thought to leave on. If we never practice dealing with the shock of real human emotion, we might just lose our capacity for it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you move forward today, maybe take a moment to appreciate the invisible living room furniture in your own life, the creators and artists you've taken for granted. And when you encounter something challenging, don't be afraid to occasionally jump straight into the deep end of those messy, raw human emotions. No stairs required. Take care, and we'll catch you next time.